Ubisoft. It is a name that invokes nothing but disappointment and frustration. This company is no stranger to scandals, and for good reason. Themselves. This is a company that shows its games looking a certain way in their trailers, then deliver products that are nothing like their trailers. This company is so lazy that it has recycled its game design across so many of the franchises that if you played one Ubisoft game, you played them all. This is a company that pioneered the practice of forcing consumers to be constantly connected to company servers just to play their single-player games. This is the company that saddles its games with Denuvo and VM Protect, a combination of anti-piracy software that is so heavy on computer resources that Ubisoft games have been known to choke on even the most powerful hardware of their times. This is a company that routinely makes its multiplayer games permanently unusable without offering to reimburse consumers for the products they paid for and now cannot play. Ubisoft has caused so many scandals that it's almost surprising that they still find a way to shit the bed. It is important to call them out for it every time, if for no other reason than to keep a record of Ubisoft's screw-ups. That is the purpose of this channel, so please press subscribe, bell and select all notifications. Liking and sharing this video would be awesome too. Follow us on Twitter while you're at it. Ubisoft's current predicament is not a new one. It has been brewing for years and will not surprise anyone who's heard of this title, Skull and Bones. This was originally conceived as an expansion for Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag to focus on expanding its excellent naval combat. Its reveal was exciting for anyone who enjoyed Black Flag. That excitement eventually faded as fans waited for more news. It would be a very long wait. The game has been mired in scandal for years due to its troubled development, which has delayed its launch so many times that consumers became skeptical about whether the game would ever launch. A product can only be delayed so many times before it starts to seem like vaporware, something that will never be released. However, Skull and Bones will be released at some point because its developer has a contract with the Singaporean government that requires them to launch a new intellectual property. This is what insider sources told Kotaku. In exchange for setting up shop on the tropical island city-state and hiring local talent, Singapore's government would provide the French company with generous subsidies. In return, local talent will be trained up, jump-starting a new game development revolution in Singapore and eventually taking the reins of the growing studio themselves. Ubisoft soaked up the government subsidies while not paying some local junior game developers enough to move out of their parents' homes. Some would eventually filter out of the studio after gaining experience working on global blockbusters, while others who stayed were rarely promoted to the highest reaches of its managerial and creative departments. There was no shortage of issues, ranging from sexual harassment and racial pay disparities, to bullying by managers, bad projects, toxic leaders, and the feeling that developers weren't empowered in the face of office politics could often sabotage that potential. This does not seem like an environment conducive to producing a compelling product. And from what Ubisoft has recently shown, Skull and Bones does not look very compelling. Ubisoft's gameplay overview trailer does not inspire much confidence, which does not bode well for the game. Trailers are the game putting its best foot forward, or rather, the developers showing their game in the best possible light. Furthermore, this is Ubisoft we're talking about. This company has been known to present trailers and make the game look much more impressive than the product they actually deliver. Remember Watch Dogs, The Division, Rainbow Six Siege? If this is the most flattering preview Ubisoft can present, Skull and Bones is in trouble. The game's design seems incoherent and at odds with its theme.
Welcome to Skull and Bones. Our game takes place during the golden age of piracy.
If Skull and Bones takes place during the golden age of piracy, which refers to the years between 1650 and the 1730s, why does the ship customization look like something out of Mad Max, a franchise set in the dystopian future? Why do we see torpedoes when they were invented in the 1800s? The trailer's representation of female pirates is ridiculously anachronistic, and their voice acting is reminiscent of Battlefield 5, going by the gameplay footage seen in Ubisoft's stream.
With me now! Dad has to win!
It is unclear whether Skull and Bones will allow you to customize your crew composition. This looks like a clumsy attempt to appease journalists into praising the game, rather than a sincere attempt to portray the real history of women who participated in actual piracy. This is what Wikipedia has to say on the subject. Women sometimes became pirates themselves, though they typically had to disguise themselves as men in order to do so. Pirates rarely allowed women onto their ships. Additionally, women were often regarded as bad luck among pirates, and it was feared that the male members of the crew would argue and fight over the woman. On many ships, women, as well as young boys, were prohibited by the ship's contract, which all crew members were required to sign. Because of the resistance to allowing women on board, many female pirates did not identify themselves as such. Anne Bonny, for example, dressed and acted like a man while on Captain Calico Jack's ship. This could have been the foundation for an authentic yet interesting campaign. A woman disguises herself as a man to board a pirate ship and rises through the ranks. Women overcoming entrenched prejudice is a trope that these developers love, and here is actual historical basis for it. A story like this would deliver the female protagonist developers, publishers and journalists are so keen on, while also satisfying consumers who appreciate authenticity in historical media. The Wikipedia article also has a list of real female pirates whose story Ubisoft could have incorporated. But of course they just can't be bothered to do that. We are not a classic narrative-driven game. We are a live game, which we are committed to for years to come. Years to come, yeah right. It is definitely not a storyline-driven game. You don't finish Skull and Bones and have credits and a cutscene at the end. A historical narrative? Well, they don't have time for that. Just make half the characters models female and call it a day. If you think this is lazy, just look at what they've done with crafting.
The world of Skull and Bones is filled with riches and resources that you'll be able to gather as you explore.
They have you chopping trees from your ship. They couldn't even be bothered to animate lumberjacks, so why do they make it a mandatory mechanic?
Crafting is an essential activity for you to progress as an infamous pirate.
If they're going to force you to do something that looks so silly, it better be fun. You won't care if you enjoy doing it. You won't care if you're enjoying the game. This looks like the opposite of fun. This looks like a chore. If you're going to force such a tedious chore on your consumers, you could at least make it look like something a pirate would actually do, so players could cling on to the authenticity that justified persevering through their boredom. If something is neither authentic nor enjoyable, it just grates on people and has no place in a game, a product that people are supposed to enjoy. Ubisoft doesn't care though. Why are they determined to shove crafting into every game they make? Probably because some high-powered executive has got it in his head that there are certain things no game can do without, and thinks crafting is one of them. This is what the game director said to Games Radar. Skull and Bones is a grittier, more mature game. It focuses much more on crafting and gathering resources to build better weapons and ships. Who asked for this? Assassin's Creed 4's system was perfectly adequate. There was no need to reinvent the wheel. Who thought it would be an improvement to have players park their ships to chop trees on the shore? It certainly wasn't the players. It's like Ubisoft has stuffed Skull and Bones with busy work and made room by removing much of the stuff that made Black Flag and other naval Assassin's Creed so enjoyable. Infantry combat, an integral component that made Black Flag and Odyssey cohesive, immersive experiences, does not even exist in Skull and Bones, meaning you cannot manually board other ships or assault forts on foot. Instead, boarding has been downgraded to a cutscene that lasts a couple of seconds. Heck, it looks like you don't even get to leave your ship even to plunder a coast. Just keep your ship in the designated circle and it automatically fills the plunder bar.
You're going to see that plunder track across the top, which is going to fill up as as our crew is stealing the booty. I got to get back in the plunder area. We definitely got to stay in close so you can't sail away or the plunder will stop.
Some might say these trailers could be a poor representation of Skull and Bones. Some Black Flag fans might try to cling on to the hope that Skull and Bones could be more enjoyable than its marketing has made it out to be. Any hope seemed to be in vain, as Kotaku said that while Skull and Bones has cost as much money as any big blockbuster game, people who have worked on it remain skeptical it will be anywhere near the hit the company needs. According to one developer, there is little to the pirate ship game beyond what was already shown when it re-emerged in a showcase livestream earlier this month. Despite a bevy of resource-gathering survival sim mechanics, they say each individual part of the game lacked depth. This feels less like a passion project of an inspired developer learning from its experiences, and more like the product of an out-of-touch suit making a checklist of things he thinks a game should have without even bothering to consider asking players what they actually enjoyed. Mining? Check. Crafting? Check. Fetch quests? Check. RPG progression? Check. Survival mechanics? Check. It looks like the developers have adhered to this corporate formula and cobbled together a product without bothering to check if it makes for a cohesive, enjoyable experience that can entice consumers to spend their time and money. This is the best Ubisoft could come up with, and what makes it all the more disappointing is that this is far from their first iteration. Skull and Bones rebooted its development in 2019, following the exit of creative director Justin Farron. If development was rebooted in 2019, why does Skull and Bones still look worse than Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Origins, games Ubisoft launched in 2017 and 2018? An internal shift towards a live service model was made by Ubisoft. And what does Ubisoft do to their live service games once they no longer serve Ubisoft's purpose? As a multiplayer-only title, you'll be unable to play the game going forward. It's not yet clear if Skull and Bones will require a constant connection to Ubisoft servers to play it single-player. You can play the game entirely solo, says game director Ryan Barnard. However, we do look at everything with a multiplayer lens. This is reminiscent of what Ubisoft said about The Crew 1 year before they released that game. Our approach to that is this is a living world. We don't really see the point of offline. Did you ever play World of Warcraft? So, World of Warcraft, you don't play offline. It doesn't mean you can't play by yourself. I played it for about 12 months, single player only, without talking to anyone. Oh, what a bore. That's our approach. It just becomes that much more interesting if you're connected and the world around you is living with other drivers and potential encounters. This sounds similar to what Ubisoft is saying about Skull and Bones now. We want players to have advantages when they group up and pirate together. You can definitely play alone, but part of the risk in our world is that if you're the lone wolf, you could potentially become prey for other players. Multiplayer is something you choose to do, either through Uplay with your friends or in-game. You can invite players to join your party. Notice they didn't use the word offline. To be fair, Ubisoft did say you could play it solo, but The Crew and For Honor have demonstrated the fact that solo play and offline are not synonymous as far as Ubisoft is concerned, and the fact that Ubisoft has been carefully avoiding the word offline is cause for concern. Perhaps Ubisoft deemed it wise to first gauge audience reactions to the trailers. Since the reception has been mixed at best, announcing an always online requirement would be the final nail in its coffin. The looming failure of Skull and Bones could have implications for the industry as a whole. Publishers will think consumers are not interested in pirate games, but they are interested. The game just has to do it right. Ubisoft knows this because they have already made such a game. They called it Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. It would have been so easy to get it right. They already had the winning formula. Just let it be. All they had to do was make a sequel or a prequel, but they couldn't even do that. Heck, they could have pivoted to remastering or remaking Black Flag with multiplayer naval combat after development was rebooted in 2019. Skull and Bones was conceived to capitalize on the critical acclaim garnered by Black Flag's naval gameplay, and yet Ubisoft removed many of the mechanics that made Black Flag so enjoyable. What makes this looming travesty all the more infuriating is the fact that Ubisoft uses the development of duds like these as an excuse to cripple games they've already produced and sold. Closing the online services for some older games allows us to focus our resources on delivering great experiences for players who are playing newer and more popular titles. Oh great, kill the duds you've already sold to consumers so you can reallocate resources to produce the next dud you'll inevitably ditch to focus on the next dud, and so on. Except most of the games Ubisoft has sentenced to die are not duds. Assassin's Creed 3 multiplayer, Driver San Francisco, Far Cry 3, Splinter Cell Blacklist. These are the few enjoyable multiplayer experiences Ubisoft has sold in its long history and now is going to kill them. For this. It would have been so easy to do the right thing. Nothing. Just leave it be. But that was beyond Ubisoft. They're killing the few unique experiences they've ever produced for this homogenized slurry that feels scarcely different from every other product that they've shat out onto the market in the last 5 years. The fact that they call it Ubisoft Original, that's just taking the piss. Surely no company would make a product that nobody would buy. So why do people still buy Ubisoft games? Does this look like something worth your money and time? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Thankfully, the reaction to Skull and Bones trailers indicates consumers are starting to tire of Ubisoft's incompetence and laziness. If this audience disinterest persists through to the game's launch, Skull and Bones could be in for a rough ride. The commercial failure of Skull and Bones is a wake-up call Ubisoft executives need, but it is not one that they are likely to heed. If Hyperscape and Breakpoint couldn't cure them of their complacency, nothing can.